Welcome to Around the Blockchain, a very, very special bearded episode. It's going to be a great episode. We're talking about Cardano and its recent issues ahead with the network. Also, what is going on at Davos. We're going to talk about the elite and also the huge amount of tech layoffs happening. Is this going to spill over to other sectors of the economy, including Bitcoin and cryptocurrency? Let's see. On today's episode, we got some great guests. Like I said, it's a special bearded episode. We're going to start with one of my favorite here that we have on the show. And I'll wait for you to go to the graphic because I don't know what we do with three people. We go to the green one first. It is Sin City Crypto. Right now, kind of helping host. Were you involved in any of the book tour stuff? I saw an old tweet from Rob earlier. Muted on.
You're here, and so yeah, we're muted.
Okay.
All right. So Rob is also a tour guide and a planner. So we definitely help set some stuff up, and we're excited. We're going there tonight with Ben and AJ.
And Rob is the one setting up the felt ropes, correct? That's his task.
Yes, he is the felt rope.
He is the felt rope.
I
All
am,
right.
I'm here as well. I'm in the background.
Hey, there you go. Oh, Rob, I had to know you're in the room. Now I'm so embarrassed. All right. Also on today's episode, another, very fashionable beard. I'm trying to get mine like his. It is Mind Your Biz. Definitely can't wait to see what he says about Cardano. And I think he'd do a good job of separating some of the fact from fiction here. And also, stubble from the crypto bubble. It is Forrest, also known as Ox Stacker. Make sure you follow him. He's got some really, really good trades on his Twitter and just really good content all around. But like I said, we're going to talk about Cardano. And
does this count as a beard right here?
It's close enough. It's more of a Tim Curry-esque goatee with a little strap on the bottom, but still looking good. Like I said, it is a bearded episode. But with Cardano, the stake pool operators, also known as the SPOs, they reported at least half of the nodes went down briefly over the weekend. IOG, which is Input Output Global, they came out with a statement saying the Cardano nodes disconnected and restarted, and saying it was just an anomaly that appears to have been triggered by a transient anomaly causing two different reactions. There were a lot of reactions. I couldn't help but go on Twitter and just see Cardano down, left and right. Actually went and looked at the chain, and things were still working. I thought it was like a Solana downage, but apparently, you just say crypto is down. Now, Mind Your Biz, I see a little smirk there. I wanted to share this graphic with you, then maybe you can help unpack here. This is from Stake with Pride, a friend of mine, and this is an outage. This is not an outage, and I don't know if we can share the screen. Oh, wait, we might. No, but
I don't see it yet, but you got me thinking about this crocodile Dundee. Now that's not an outage. This is an outage. But you got to show something.
Yeah, and you know what? It appeared that Cardano just kind of, for a couple minutes, it was like early 22 or maybe even, early 22. Like, you can still do a Cardano transaction, just maybe took a couple minutes. Did Cardano go completely offline, Mind Your Biz?
So it appears that it did not go entirely offline. And here's the thing about consensus models and blockchains in general. They're highly resistant. It's a bit like the redundancy that you might have in larger data centers that are entirely centralized. So funny thing, so Google Cloud, right? So a lot of us, whether we like to use it or not, probably not the best thing for our privacy. If you use Google Cloud services for like Drive or Gmail, or whatever else, they started off with like 9 redundant server farms around the world. They're up to like, I think over 20 at this point. And so these fallback redundancies and a lot of these centralized database systems are what we've inherited moving forward into the blockchain ecosystem with these proof of stake consensus protocols. The difference is, DZ, that the block times don't decrease if you have any of these node operators going offline. So no, it appears as though the Cardano ecosystem didn't crash because some of those nodes went down, because they didn't all entirely go down catastrophically the way that, like you mentioned, Solanas have multiple times repeatedly in catastrophic fashion.
Yeah, and here's the graphic right here. This, that's not a knife. This is an outage. This is not an outage. 0%, that would to me mean an outage. Like I try to flip the lights on and nothing comes on. This is not an outage where my fan, 4 of the bulbs, maybe 3 of them worked, 1 of them didn't, but still things were operating. Now, Forrest, they tagged CoinDesk in this because CoinDesk had a little bit of an inflammatory article. I saw a lot of Cardano community members getting really mad at CoinDesk saying, hey, this is not an outage, spreading more FUD. Some people even said, hey, Charles Hoskinson, can you just hurry up and buy CoinDesk already so they'll shut up? What were your thoughts when you saw the media reaction to the little bit of a slippage they had with all the node operators?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand, like, and prioritize and understand where the market prioritizes decentralization, and understand that there is a place for less decentralized protocols. Now, I'm not calling Cardano a less decentralized protocol. I want to be clear about that. But when stuff like this happens, you have everybody rush in to say, "Oh, it's not decentralized. Oh, this was a key fault, the key issue." And obviously, the community that understands it best is going to be able to provide good explanations like Mind Your Biz just did. On the flip side of that, on the Solana side, I'm of the opinion that I'm actually, from an investor standpoint, I'm a fan of Solana. Now, I recognize and I do value decentralization very highly, but I recognize that Solana may not be the most decentralized chain. And as an investor, I'm personally okay with that. And a lot of investors are okay with that. There's strengths and weaknesses in various chains, and there's going to be space and room for multiple different types of chains. In fact, in the future, I believe that most blockchains are going to be centralized DApp-based chains that are run privately by private enterprises. That being said, Cardano seems to have bounced back really, really nicely. Seems like it wasn't an issue. Seems like no decentralization was at risk or sacrificed, and there wasn't an opportunity for any malicious type attacks. So yeah, there's always going to be people that rush in to hate on a specific coin or a community. I think we need less tribalism in the space and a little bit more. People need to take time to kind of understand what actually happened before they jump to conclusions.
All right. Well, I'm glad you said that. We need to take time to understand what happened before we jump to conclusions. Sin City, a lot of people are saying IOG failed in that regard. They could have done a better job communicating. They could have gotten in front of the issue before CoinDesk, headlines are being published. Were they on top of the situation, in your opinion, or was there a little bit of lackluster performance there?
I mean, we've seen what happens when stuff hits the fan and you have these founders come out, everything's fine, and then everything's not fine. But I want to go to what Forrest said, and although I personally disagree with him, he has a very valid point. You want enterprises and businesses to come into crypto, they're gonna want someone to have some sort of control. If stuff hits the fan, they can go to that person and be like, "Hey, what's going on? Fix it." Blah 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 blah. And although if you're a true crypto ethos person and you believe in decentralization, this is not something you want to see as far as with Solana and being able to shut the network down and restart it back up. But you need both sides of the coin, right? And I think this is actually a positive for Cardano. I mean, at least it happened now where there's not a lot of activity happening on the network versus, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now when the network has grown and use cases have grown and now, 50% reduction in speed. The network did not go down. Blocks were still being produced, right? It just was slower. It lagged. And the other thing is this: no one had to go in and shut it down. No one had to go in and restart it. And so to me, this is a net positive. But again, I do agree with Forrest. A lot of investors do like the idea of centralization. That way they can pinpoint one person or a foundation and say, hey, fix this or what's wrong or make it better.
Mind Your Biz, what do you think about that? Enterprise, kind of requiring a babysitter, a handler, someone to smack the child's hand when they pick something hot up. Is that a reality that you also agree with, where, big money, a Nike might be more inclined to, work with something highly centralized versus Cardano?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. I think as far as institutional money is concerned, and as far as there being institutional guarantees, I think that, yeah, both Forrest and Dave, they from Sin City Crypto, brought a great point up that institutional investors don't like risk. You would think it's the other way around, right? You're like, oh my gosh, you guys are the titans of industry. You must have made big risks. Well, maybe that was true 20 years ago. But a lot of these characters, both VCs and angels, they hate risk. They're some of the most risk-averse people you'll ever meet in your life. They're always bandwagoning into investments, which is, by the way, how FTX totally didn't pass due diligence, was that they all aped in together by being what they thought was risk-averse and joining their friends. But so like there isn't always safety in numbers, and that kind of thinking of like, well, we just need these guarantees. Make sure that nothing bad can happen on a blockchain. Somehow prevent the world from being a dangerous place. Prevent people from having freedom, so the world isn't a dangerous place. You know, the sort of cypherpunk / libertarian in me really doesn't like that at all. Not one bit. I don't think Satoshi did either, and that's why I think that so many of the other consensus algorithms that maybe aren't even proof of work based, but that were inspired by Satoshi, don't adhere to that as strictly. So on the one hand, yes, you're right. VCs are craven cowards. They hate real risk. They hate real risk when it comes to the real world and things potentially breaking or not going according to their plan. And on the other hand, they have huge investor groups behind them who they're thinking about, which is why they're risk averse. These two things can both be true, but I don't think that should dissuade us from having a very intense focus on decentralization and dangerous freedom. If there are casualties along the way, that's what dangerous freedom means, and that, in my mind, is what cryptocurrency stands for.
All right, and I gave you an extra point for saying the word craven. I love that word. It's a great word. Now, Forrest, I'm going to try to get you to maybe argue for the other side here. Is there a world in which companies are going to work with Cardano, or do they see the decentralization as just too much of a hurdle to overcome? We can't really control it. Is it going to be relegated to the My Pillow guys of a business here?
Yeah, so there's definitely an argument on both sides, and for what it's worth, I am pro decentralization. I just, as an investor, I'm pro money, so I like to follow where the money goes. And um, uh, there's certain sacrifices and trade-offs that institutions are willing to make this early in the space. And Cardano is, and I'm a Cardano fan. Nothing outperforms it in a bull market from an investment standpoint. It did 150 plus X multiples off the bottom. But Cardano does not make those sacrifices or shortcuts, and some of those shortcuts are faster delivery time, faster transaction speed. And I'm not saying that Cardano's slow, but when we got into the bull market, there was an opportunity where there was high gas fees and slow transaction times out of Ethereum, which was the premier layer one network that everybody was on. And Cardano took a longer time to deliver a product to the market and to get smart contracts live and to get NFTs up. Whereas Solana threw a ton of money behind, got a ton of VC investment behind them, and they were able to ship out a product that was less decentralized, but was faster, worked really really well. Went down from time to time, and they rebooted it, but it ultimately gave it filled a niche. It filled a need in the market where there was actually demand. And remember, there was frothy demand in the bull market for a network that could deliver high throughput and fast transaction times. And what we saw was, in a frothy market, people cared much less about decentralization when it came to actually investing their money and participating in NFTs and participating in some of the stuff that you can do on chain. So for that reason, I think that Solana, ended up, being kind of one of the bigger winners of the kind of gas wars situation that we got in. So I do think that there's always going to be a subset of people that will not value decentralization. They're used to centralization. They don't feel like it's that big of a trade-off, and they'll just continue to invest in centralized solutions. And yeah, I mean, you can the Solana versus Cardano decentralization, centralization things like a different debate, but just philosophically, I think there's two kind of cohorts of people, and some people aren't going to make those sacrifices, and Cardano seems to be one of those entities that will not take shortcuts and will not make sacrifices, which is going to be a longer term approach, particularly from an investment angle as well.
All right, great stuff there. Now, Sin City, let's look at, a long-term horizon here with just the health of both of these networks in the future. 5 years from now, do you think that they're still both going to be, a top 15, top 20 L1 competitor to Ethereum? Or, some of these issues going to be too large to overcome? Also, I want to know, what do you think about the transactions per second? Is that still going to be something that creates a frothy narrative next bull run?
Okay, so to your second question, TPS and throughput, you guys got to remember, once Hydra goes live on Cardano, we're talking upwards of 3 million transactions per second, because it's going to be divided into the different stake pools. So 3,000 stake pools, 1,000 or 100,000 transactions per second, whatever the math comes out to. That's what you're looking at, the capabilities and possibilities. And then what would you want to compare? You said Solana and Cardano. Are they going
Yeah,
to be
Solana and
competing in
Cardano,
about?
5 years. I mean, do you still see, are people gonna forgive Solana's outages? And will big money still be able to look at Cardano as a viable option, given that it is hard to control?
Well, that's the thing, hard to control, right? Anytime you, as a business, you put a lot of resources and money into a company or a project, you want to be able to have a say. And so if I'm sitting here, I'm looking at a project like Cardano, whose founder does not give a crap about your investment, does not give a crap about anything but making sure the chain does what it's supposed to do, versus a chain like Solana, who's way more centralized. Yes, it has some blips, but you can pick up the phone and call Anatoly Yakovenko and be like, "Hey, man, we need this, 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 and this," or "What do you think about this, this?" And he'll actually, listen. Of course, I'm assuming here, but what Solana what worries me is a few things. One, how much sway and manipulation did FTX and Alameda and Sam have on the price of Solana? Right, it ended up being a what was it, 50, 60 billion dollars. It got up to $245 per token. What would that have looked like, and what would the growth have looked like if Sam and Alameda were out of the picture? Also, you have tons of projects that are leaving Solana. I know they say developer activities there, but you're talking about the two top NFT project in DeGods and Utes that decided to leave Solana for their number one competitor, Ethereum, or Ethereum and Polygon. And so when you ask me in 5 years, I definitely think I think Solana will be around. Will they be a top 10 or top 5 layer one? I don't know. I can argue that something like Aptos, which is kind of like a Solana 2.0, let a lot of people say, might kind of take the cake as far as that goes. But for me, Cardano will always be a hard one for the enterprises to build on because of everything I mentioned. And that's unfortunate for them because Cardano has such a tremendous track record. And even though 50% of the nodes went down, nothing stopped, nothing got shut down. So I guess we'll see. But
Yeah.
if you're telling me what companies, what am I going to pick? One I have zero control over or one I can influence control over? I'm going with the latter.
I agree with your Aptos narrative. I don't know if it'll be Aptos, but yeah, the VC money that made all the money with Solana, they're looking for a new shiny toy. They're not looking to double down right now. Mind your biz. I want to ask you a quick question. What are your thoughts on Hydra? Is Cardano going to be able to scale to this tremendous amount of TPS?
Wow, that's a big question. You're asking me to give a giant thumbs up and a giant thumbs down. What I'll
no
do
nuance.
instead, I'm going to reframe this just a little bit and just say that I applaud all the work over at IOHK. They've done and IO Global, right? They've done phenomenal work over many years. They contributed a heck of a lot to the Ethereum Classic ecosystem, which made its way into all the rest of the EVM chains, whether people realize it or not. So if you like things like Binance Smart Chain and how fast that and low fee that is, some of their code made it into that. So these are really intelligent people doing really great work. And I have no doubt that it's going to improve the performance of Cardano, but for it to function exactly as they lay out, we have yet to see, right? We have yet to see, just like how the massive TPS narrative for Bitcoiners on Lightning has been. At this point, it's almost a meme. Like, sure, maybe it does work, but what are the trade-offs? Like, we're going to have still sort of the blockchain trilemma to contend with after Hydra goes into production. So I'm reserving judgment, easy.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the ETH Classic. All the 0x protocols can kind of lend a point that direction. And say, hey, help get us to where we're at today. Well, someone else has 0x in their name. And Forrest, just a quick rebuttal. What do you feel about Solana NFT ecosystem in particular? To Sin City's point that the top two just left.
Yeah, so that is a super bullish narrative for those two projects because they're under the same umbrella, like DeGods moving to Ethereum. They're moving from a very vibrant, rich NFT ecosystem, but to one that they're going to Ethereum where there's so much more wealth and liquidity. So I expect that to be a positive change. I will say this about Solana. Solana has a very strong developer and NFT community and ecosystem. Is it the most decentralized chain in the world? No, I don't believe that it is. But I do know, and Vitalik Buterin kind of tweeted this out, that towards the bottom or at the Pico bottom for Solana price action, he said, now that the bad money people are out of Solana, I've heard that a lot of smart, intelligent people are working on the chain and developing the chain, and hopefully now it'll have its time to shine. I think that if you look at the stats, we were looking at this earlier today with Sin City Crypto. Solana has the #2 the amount of active developers on the chain. It's like over 2,000 active developers, which is only second to Ethereum's like 5,000 plus. So there's a large amount of activity on Solana, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's going to stick around. Their token itself and the price action has been the unfortunate victim of FTX and VCs, and you can maybe calling it a victim is not right. Maybe the Solana Foundation were obviously in on that as well. But essentially, they do have a strong community, and community can go a very long way in this space.
Yeah, I still hold a few Solana NFTs. Shout out to Art Punk team, and I was on the Utes list. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if honestly the NFT community and the other builders just drag it along until the next bull run. Do we get a whole new hype cycle, and then all bets are off? Who knows what will happen? All right, let's talk about Davos just real quick. It's the big event over the weekend. Of course, it's not global elite, because that makes you think it's Ronaldo and Jordan and all Mike Tyson all got together. No, this ineffectual elites all gathering. Some are calling it a gathering of elites, but they have launched out an attack on freedom and cryptocurrency, and they're using a Swift style system. It's launched by Red Date Technology. Has a lot of involvement with China's blockchain project, and some of the things they're talking about at Davos was a lot of CBDC talk. A lot of regulation talk, and a lot of talk on public chain cryptocurrencies, and a lot of attacks on Bitcoin. But before we get into the specifics, mind your biz, you kind of take a good step back every now and then. And you look at these issues, and you kind of separate the noise from what's actually substance. Are we putting too much power into these these group of elites flying in their private jets to Switzerland? Is it overhyped, or is it actually even darker than we thought? And, maybe we should even be paying more attention.
That's a really good question. I mean, as far as where we are in what AOC likes to call the cheap seats, and other leaders of the world like to refer to as the cheap seats, it's really difficult for us to make change by just pointing at the sort of the headlines that come in from places like Davos and events like this. But I don't think, and without saying anything that's like sounds, don't want to wrap on too much tinfoil, right, for your audience today, or get you flagged.
It's ATB. It's okay. It's not the main channel.
Awesome. Okay, fine. I can show
mixed
some
glaring
later
at
on.
you now.
I've got a great list of tokens I like to promote later on. So yeah. But seriously, I think that these people actually, I think that some of them are players. Now, are they pawns? Probably, but I think some of them are players. And I think the chessboard really is world power. And I think that there really are some machinations that go beyond our elected officials around the world. I think there really are some groups such as the WEF that have an interest in shaping global policy, and they do so without our direct or explicit consent. So we should concern ourselves with the kinds of conversations that are happening there. But as far as the individuals themselves, no, DZ, I'm a firm believer in what was it your mom used to tell you, right? Or our moms used to say to us, right? About how average minds and then great minds and what they discuss. I think I'd rather discuss ideas. And I think the ideas that they're discussing there will affect us.
Yeah, you don't want to talk about the past. You don't want to talk about people. You want to talk about ideas here. Now, Forrest, real quick, I do want to say this section is brought to you by Presin.io. So big shout out to Presin. Forrest, I want to ask you, they're talking about this new blockchain, Swift-like system, and it's not going to be accepting Bitcoin. Now, do you see this attack on Bitcoin? Obviously, on some sectors, is very negative. But now as we move into I don't want to say a globalist, populist agenda, but there's a lot of pushback with social media. There's a lot of, fighting mainstream narratives. If fighting Bitcoin becomes a mainstream narrative from the elites, quote unquote, do you see that as a bullish scenario for Bitcoin in the long run?
Yeah, it's like you tell a kid not to put their hand in the cookie jar. You say you can't have cookies. they're gonna find a way. So the more you tell somebody that you can't have something, especially if people believe that it's good for them, the more they're gonna want it. I do think that it is from their perspective, right? Put yourself in their shoes and align yourself with their incentives, whatever you believe those may be. I think it's smart on their point to not include Bitcoin. Why? Because as soon as you create a CBDC, you have to section that off from the rest of the decentralized crypto world so airtight, because if there's so much as a bridge or a leak over to Ethereum or over to Bitcoin where people can take their CBDCs and easily buy Bitcoin or easily buy Ethereum, all of a sudden they've just excelled. Like they've just accelerated the move over to hard money, to cryptocurrencies. And that's the last thing that they want. So if they launch a CBDC and there's a bridge where you can just very easily buy ETH with all your CBDC, and you can store your money in ETH or Bitcoin or whatever you're bullish on, Cardano, and you can take it makes it easier for the average person who's got all of their money in this CBDC to now just have 20% in a CBDC to pay bills and whatnot, and then have 80% in Bitcoin, Ethereum, so on and so forth. That is a very bad thing for them. So I get why they're doing it. I don't necessarily agree with it. On the topic of pushing back as far as social media goes, I think it's become increasingly important for people, for channels like the main channel, channels like this channels like the three of us are representing here, and Twitter profiles and whatnot, because it gives a voice. Social media is now giving a voice, and you see that they're terrified of this. You see so many people getting deplatformed and being censored. They're absolutely terrified of the average person gaining a following, gaining a voice in the space, because it directly strips power away from them. And a lot of these people, yes, they have influence in some of these big gatherings and through some of these different forums, World Economic Forum, whatever, but they don't necessarily have the same large followings that we do. My Twitter, and I have a smaller Twitter profile, I got 1 million impressions last month, and that's from a small Twitter profile. There's channels and voices out there that are having huge impacts in the space, and it drowns them out to some degree and strips power from them. So I do think that is we're going to see more of it, and I think it's incredibly important.
All right, great points there. Now, Sin City Crypto, mind your biz. He brought up a point: is saying this from the cheap seats is sometimes a little bit difficult. I think Forrest kind of maybe spelled out a scenario from the cheap seats. How can we affect change? How can we put a spotlight on these elites trying to maybe destroy Bitcoin or even destroy your freedoms?
You cannot destroy Bitcoin unless you completely get rid of the internet. So, but Forrest, he made such a good point, and he does this all the time, by the way, where if they were to integrate that into their system they're building, it would literally accelerate. Well, exactly what he said. It would accelerate it. And if you think about it, right? When it comes to government and entities like globalists and the WEF and governments and countries, it is all about power and control. And Bitcoin is something that you cannot control. No matter what you try to do, you can't shut it down. You can do the mining bans. They can only take you so far until one country decides, hey, it's economically worth it for us to let these miners come and mine. They're trying to get everything on a global level as far as regulation and how to oversee cryptocurrency. It's not going to work. We can't even get Congress here in the US to agree to pass a freaking bill to bring inflation down, let alone get every single leader of every country to agree on how to regulate crypto and Bitcoin. So it is a threat to them. And although our voices get drowned out, and in certain platforms, whether you have a following of 200 million people or 10 million people or whatever, if you go against what they're trying to do and say, it's been proven your voice will be drowned out. Now, Twitter has been, has changed since Elon Musk took over. And so, yes, our voices are being heard a little more, but how much effect is it really going to have? I don't think no matter what we say or do, it's not going to change what they want to do, what they plan on doing, what they're going to do.
All right. Well, Forrest, he did bring up, citizen journalists on some level. This isn't sponsoring anything. I just want to give a shout out to Rebel News on Twitter, Rebel News Online. They grill the Pfizer CEO in the streets. They're catching these elites in the streets as they have to walk from building to building. They asked Greta about, why won't you condemn OPEC CEO? They just grilled him repeatedly over the findings that they had hidden. They approached Klaus Schwab. Rebel News Online. Just want to give them a shout out. All right, let's talk about the next topic here, which is brought to you by BC Vault. So shout out to BC Vault. What are these tech layoffs? Huge amounts. We might even have a graphic I'm gonna pull up, but over 130,000 people have been laid off from some of these media companies and tech companies in the past 12 months. Here you can see a breakdown of the percentage. Starting from the bottom, I mean, Coinbase, Snap, Robinhood, Lyft, Twitter, Meta. The list goes on and on. Twitter, of course, you know, a huge amount of their employees with that RIF, that reduction in force. Looking at just some of the numbers here, I mean, Microsoft was also in there, but currently unemployment rate numbers, they all seem great. I'm looking at it right here. It's 3.5, ties the lowest mark of the 21st century. Then you have tech
Wait,
companies.
our government would never lie to us about that. Our government would never lie to us about these numbers.
Well,
What are
mind
you
your biz.
doing right now?
Could you break down? You know, I've heard the term massaging the data. Mind your biz. You heard that they've massaged the data. What does that mean to the layman here? It doesn't mean
Well, it can mean-
shiatsu.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of can, right? It means that you
Close
press
spelling.
something that you don't like for a really long time. You got to breathe your way through it, and then maybe it just goes away, right? Maybe in your mind it just goes away. So they keep on pressing a different point of the data and tell you, like, oh well, I guess, let's see, unemployment as measured by this specific number. So people who what we used to call underemployed, people who are underemployed, they're at least employed by 20 to 30 hours a week, and they're in this specific income bracket, and they're in this specific geographical area of the United States. Well, all of a sudden, hey, we solved unemployment, right? Like the numbers match now. That's massaging the data, right? Taking stuff that isn't really a representative sample, that doesn't really look like you or me or the costs that we have day to day, and saying that that is really success. That's what this massaging the data looks like, easy. And I think that's how you get numbers like the number you just quoted, even though you see some of the biggest employers laying people off left and right.
Wait, does that mean the CPI and inflation could also be incorrect? What are your thoughts on the inflation data?
Well, I've been saying it here on your show for the better part of what, 6 months since the last time that since the first time that we started talking about CPI. The math ain't mathin'. We'll just say, my friend Trek with 2Ks likes to put it that way. The math sure ain't mathin', DZ. Where we look at when you go to the store, you try to buy eggs, which if you can find them at all, are clearly so overpriced that they just don't match that level of inflation. They're telling us that the consumer price index should reflect. Something doesn't work between what we're spending at the gas pump, what we're spending at the grocery line, and what we're spending on basic necessities, not extravagant stuff, right? Not our disposable income, not our additional dollar cost average, or play money where we like to go a little degen, right? And let's be real, we all like to go a little degen in crypto, but not that money.
Yep.
The money that we spend on just feeding our kids, that stuff, they're asking us in some cases for nearly double at the point of sale. How are we getting single-digit inflation? It just doesn't add up.
Yeah, there's a quote from a woman I admire greatly, highly respected, one of the highest paid women in her field, and that is Judge Judy. And she says something that's very simple, very pithy. If it doesn't make sense, it didn't happen. Single digit doesn't make sense to me. All right, Forrest, what do you think about these tech layoffs? A lot of times, a riff is like it's like a band-aid. Twitter, I don't think they're going to have another riff anytime soon, but sometimes you'll see a 8%, and then you wait a couple months, another 10%, and I don't know if it's for the general psyche of the employees or maybe they just don't know how drastically they can cut. But do you think that the riffs, these reductions in forces, is this going to continue through 23, or do you expect maybe the worst of the pain is over?
I want to say so. Okay, so my base case is that we do get recession in 2023. I think that the tech companies just happen to be a leading indicator here, and so much, or to the degree that I feel like a lot of these cushy tech jobs are. You constantly like see these videos of like, oh, a day in the life of a Google employee, and they like get nothing done
I saw one
all
today.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what happens is a lot of these tech companies have been growing very rapidly. We've been in a bull market. They've made a ton of money, and then they've overhired. And they've overhired with a lot of employees that aren't necessarily needed. And I think as much as Elon was hated for making this decision by many people and making all these layoffs, I think he proved that you can still run the platform successfully and even improve the platform. I know my personal experience on the platform has actually improved since those layoffs happened and since Elon Musk took over. Things continue to run with fewer people and less overhead. So to some degree, he did kind of prove and set an example to a lot of these tech companies that maybe they have a higher overhead than they need. Now, that's unfortunate that people are losing their jobs, and I'm sure there's some people losing their jobs that were incredibly productive, and they've just gotten caught in these layoffs. But ultimately, the reason this is happening is it's this hangover from the big party that we just had, all the quantitative easing through 2019, 2020, and even into 2021, followed by quantitative tightening and us trying to get these inflation numbers back down, or the Fed trying to get these inflation numbers back down. They've got to tighten. They've got to raise interest rates, and that puts a lot of strain on companies as it makes capital more expensive. So, and it makes growth more difficult. So, we're in a contractionary period, and I think we'll continue that most likely through 2023. Hopefully, we get a light at the end of the tunnel in 2024 and 2025.
Yeah, the one I watched today, the day in the life of, I think it was a Google engineer, and it was 2 meetings, and then the rest was like frappuccinos and yoga. That's essentially their day. And you think of the startup ethos of, say, even as recently as 10 years ago, especially 20 years ago, 30 years ago, was sleeping in the office, 80-hour work days, 100-hour work days, because you're trying to build something special. All right, Sin City Crypto. No, I'm not like saying we should all work 80-hour work weeks. I'm not saying that, but 30, yeah, I think we could, maybe step it up a little bit. Well, Sin City Crypto, are you guys following, Twitter's example here? Or, you just laid off everybody? Or a more serious question here. These reductions in force that we're seeing, Elon came in, slashed half the workforce, and we saw all these other companies come forward. Are they being reactive to seeing, hey, Elon did it, maybe we could tighten the ship a little bit? Or are they being proactive? Because like Forrest said, it could be a recession looming.
So I don't know if they're being neither. I definitely don't think they're looking at Elon Musk and saying, "Oh, he's laying people off. We should lay people off." No, I don't think that's what it is, and I don't know if they're being proactive either. But hear me out here. I think these layoffs are a net positive moving forward, and let me tell you why. Okay. The Fed has talked about the jobs market and unemployment rate for months on end, right? This number keeps sticking at 3.5, 3.7. They want the number to go up. That's one of the indicators they look at before they're even going to pivot. If inflation is down, but unemployment is still low, inflation, if inflation is not down to their 2% and unemployment is still at 3.5%, they are not going to reverse course and start loosening policy again. So you have, I believe the number was 2 jobs for every 1 person who's looking for a job. And so that supply demand in the workforce is completely off kilter. So what I'm curious is, these layoffs, are they completely getting rid of the positions in general, or are they going to look to fill them back again moving forward when economic conditions get better? Now, if they do remove those positions, now that brings that supply demand a little closer to even, which is good, which is what they want to see. We saw the baby boomers are retiring at a breakneck pace. A lot of them didn't come back from the pandemic. And so that's created a large void and gap in the workforce. And so what's going to happen is people are going to get laid off. And yes, that sucks. But guess what? When you get laid off, you start looking into your finances, and the way you spend money changes, right? And so now maybe people won't go out and go to restaurants all the time and spend money on filet and lobster. And maybe that'll bring those prices down. Maybe when you go to the grocery store, instead of buying 2 dozen eggs, you're going to buy a dozen eggs. I know it sounds crazy that I'm saying it's a good thing, but if you look at it from a grand scope of things, right? And what the Fed is looking for, especially if you're looking for risk on assets in your crypto portfolio or things to get back to normal, there has to be some sort of a reset, right? People can't continue to pay $8 for a dozen eggs, or $10 for a dozen eggs, or $5 for a tank of gas, or for a gallon of gasoline. And so things need to change. And unless the war in Ukraine and Russia comes to a complete stop, and China stops doing lockdowns, and the supply chain comes back, then this is kind of what we're going to have to see. Quell demand, let supply catch up. And the Fed sees unemployment number at 5-6%. They're more prone to reversing course and starting to pump money back into the markets than they are if unemployment's at 3.5%.
I love that theory. I'm even going to double down with more conspiracy. If that is the case, you can almost envision an OPEC style scenario where you get the tech companies. I'm not saying collusion, but that maybe they huddle their heads together and say, you know what, let's go ahead, create some pain, vacate hundreds of thousands of positions, similar to OPEC shrinking by hundreds of thousands of barrels per day. Next thing you know, you see a lot of pain. You got people willing to work for pennies. Just like, hey, they'll come when gas is $4 a gallon, they'll come a-crawling. And just like, when that light bill is due, they'll come a-crawling then. I think that's an interesting theory. It's a lot to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I disagree. I disagree. I got some pushback on
it.
I got some counterpoint. I love Dave. I love Dave, what Dave's saying here, but I got some counterpoint. And that is that, so on the one hand, I wish that it worked the way that you laid out. I wish that, things kind of did start to fall in line and you could see a bubble pop and you could see things find support again. You could see consumer price, the price of consumer goods find some kind of equilibrium. You remember, though, that Jerome Powell last year went on record saying that he was bothered by the fact that wages were increasing faster than the nominal 2% inflation rate. He was actually advocating that people not get paid commensurate with the current inflation. He wanted people's wages to go up at 2%, not even 3%. He wanted to try to get employers to cap people's wages at 2% inflation in the midst of what's currently happening.
Of course, because if think about it this way, right? And you make a point. If your wages keep going up, the company, Amazon and Google and Kroger, they're not going to take that hit. Guess what? They're going to pass that extra expense down onto the consumer. So if I'm getting paid more to work at a grocery store, your groceries will cost more money. They are not going to absorb that cost. They're going to push that cost down to the customer. And so, of course, he's not going to, why would he want 10% increase in employee wages when he knows on the back end, the company's just going to turn around and make their product more expensive?
Yeah, no, the real inflation not being 2% with wages being at 2%. And then, you ask someone older, like, well, why can't you afford a mortgage payment, support a wife and 2 children off of one job? It's like, well, wages aren't quite keeping up with what they said it needs to be. But all great points. I think it's a great episode. Make sure you hit that like button if you're watching at home. Make sure you follow all 3 accounts here. Their links are going to be in the description. But that is all we have time for. It looks like Forrest ended up taking it home. It was a really good episode, all the way up to 30 points here. Forrest, feel free. Leave us with some parting thoughts. Take it away, buddy.
Yeah, guys. So it looks like we're in a bit of a bear market rally here as far as the market goes, and I know that's what everybody's getting drawn into. And I don't necessarily think that it is a bull trap. I do think we get some continuation after maybe a pullback. And what I want to kind of drive home is I just want to caution people: go look at the yield curve. It is extraordinarily inverted. That has been a big indicator of recessions in the past. And I think what I don't want to see people happen, or what I don't want to see happen to people, is people get sucked into a little bear market rally, buying the top and then getting hammered in a recession later on this year. So obviously none of us here can predict the future, but please do be careful out there. And we'll leave it at that.
You never go broke taking profits. That's all we got for today. Until next time, Biz Squad, easy out.